Conversations with Al McFarlane. Glad to be with you and glad to have you along. Today is Friday. We usually talk about health on Friday. We call this the Healing Circle, and we'll be joined by colleagues in the Healing Circle momentarily. I want to focus to begin with on the Omicron variation. That's the talk, that's the issue, that's the concern that is addressing or facing the country and the world. And I think it's okay for us to uh, spend some time discussing that. Uh, Today is Friday. As I said, we do the Healing Circle momentarily. We'll be joined by members of the African American uh, uh, Child Wellness Institute for our regular conversation. But today we're also pleased to have a conversation with Senator Tina Smith, who will be joining us about 20 minutes after. And Senator Smith is going to talk about not only health, Omicron, COVID-19, what we can do to be safe and protected, but about the infrastructure bill. That's important. That's passed. What does it mean for the country? What does it mean for Minnesota? I want to start by just sort of summarizing what I'm reading in the most recent report from the New York Times. Their article posted about an hour ago says several things. One, that uh, the Omicron variant is being found now in several states around the country. And they say that the community spread of the variant is inevitable, although scientists caution that much remains unknown, including its severity and how current vaccines are performing against it. Um, Things you need to know about Omicron: health officials are bracing for community spread as the virus reaches more states, including Minnesota, Nebraska. A preliminary study in South Africa shows a sudden, sharp rise of infections as Omicron is spreading. Most COVID vaccines will work as boosters, a study suggests. And other information, with the cases of Omicron now recorded from New York to Hawaii, health officials across the U.S. Say the community spread of the virus is inevitable, with one case already traveling from an anime convention in New York to Minnesota. President Biden is confronting the worrisome new variant with a strategy that encourages boosters for all adults and aims to expand testing availability and improve its affordability. Plans laid out in a speech that he made from the National Institutes of Health on Thursday. President Biden reiterated on Friday morning that his administration's new measures were sufficient to deal with the spread of the new variant. He said, quote, I think I know a fair amount about this issue, but I'm not a scientist, so I continue to rely on the scientists, asking them whether or not we have to move beyond what we did yesterday. He said at the White House. Right now, they're saying no, quote, close quote. Additional cases of Omicron are being reported in all corners of the country. Officials have announced that New York State had confirmed its first 5 cases of the variant. They include a 67-year-old woman in Suffolk County who returned from South Africa, other residents in Queens and Brooklyn. Um, Another case was identified as a vaccinated man from Minnesota who had recently traveled to New York City for the anime convention I mentioned earlier at the Javits Center in Midtown Manhattan, which hosted 53,000 attendees over 3 days. And because of that, officials immediately urged that all convention participants get tested. Leaders in Minnesota credited robust disease surveillance systems for finding the Minnesota case. This news is concerning, but it's not a surprise. Governor Tim Walz said in a statement, he said, "We know that this virus is highly infectious and moves quickly throughout the world. Minnesotans know what to do to keep each other safe now, to get the vaccine, to get tested, wear a mask indoors, and get a booster." Well, the story goes on. It's in the New York Times today. and it was important to bring to you because it directly affects Minnesota. Pleased to welcome my colleague and co-host and friend, Dr. Brevada Garrett Akinsanya, our leader at the African American Child Wellness Institute and co-convener of our Healing Circle on Friday. And Dr. B, good to see you again. So much is happening on this front, and I'm glad that we have the opportunity to work together to bring the issues of concern, to give voice to the concerns of our community.
Mhm.
In a sense, giving voice to the voiceless often. If we don't, who will? And I'm glad that we have chosen to and have been afforded the opportunity to bring our concerns front and center for us and for the rest of the world as well. How are you, Dr. B?
I'm doing very well. I'm
You know what?
I'm
And
boosted. I've
go ahead.
had
I
my
don't have my
booster.
headset in. I'm listening.
Uh,
I'm seeing you talk, but let me go ahead. I hear you now.
I said I'm doing very well. I got my booster, and I was happy to get it. I got my flu shot the same day, and I was just I've never been so happy to see a needle. My whole life is always when I got my booster. So
Hmm.
I really, really, really am thinking that what we have to do is just accept the reality that we're under threat.
Hmm.
And if you are under threat, you do things, you either fight, flight, freeze, or surrender. And so we don't want to freeze and not do nothing. We don't want to flee and run from the problem because it's going to go with us wherever we go. So the only thing we can surrender that, oh my goodness, COVID's here and I'm never going to be able to do anything, or we can fight. So the best way to do it is to I choose fighting. Fighting for my
Hmm.
life, fighting for my babies, fighting for my community, fighting for my elders, fighting for this whole world by doing my part, by getting my vaccination, both of them, by getting my booster, by I still stay. I don't care if I don't know you like that. I'm 6 feet from you. You know, I
That's
can
right.
love you from 6 feet because love
That's
can
right.
go miles. It can surely go 6 feet. So I can
Mhm.
I can stay away from you for 6 feet. I can surely wash my hands and keep my germ infection infector disinfectant in my hand. I can do
Mhm.
all of those things. I can wear a mask. There's a lot of things I can do to fight, and I can stay away from enclosed crowds of a whole bunch of everybody. I can do that.
I
So
had
I'm
a
fighting.
conversation, Dr. B, with one of the young people that has been a friend of mine over the years, but recently I'm bringing him on to do some work. He has a company. I won't say his name, but he's going to be hearing this conversation. And I asked him, because I ask everybody, young man, have you had your vaccinations? And this guy's smart. He's a good guy. He's a good human being, very smart. And surprised me, but didn't surprise me. He said, "Well, we've been thinking about it. I'm kind of waiting to see how it settles out because there's so much information and so much disinformation." And so I said, "Well, hold up, young man, young brother. I can tell you that when I grew up in Kansas City at age 5, 7, 8, 9, we had a polio pandemic around the world, and we could see people walking with these braces and 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 crutches, and who we were told were going to be in that condition for the rest of their lives because they were stricken with polio if they lived. And our parents dutifully embraced the science. We were all aware, we were educated about the work of Dr. Jonas Salk. So we knew what the Salk vaccine was as it was being developed and deployed. It was part of the classroom instruction so that when the time came to do mass inoculations, we were prepared. And the main thing, kids and needles, right? We were prepared to be brave and soldierly and walk out as a group onto the playground or into the gym and get our shots, and we did. And the same thing happened again when they developed responses to measles, mumps, and rubella, MMR. They developed vaccines to deal with diphtheria, tetanus, and whooping cough. And so we've experienced this thing of being required to get vaccinated in order to go to school, in order to live a normal life. We also know, as we grow older and we choose to travel, when I've traveled either to the Caribbean, but particularly to Africa, you cannot go to Ghana without having shots for yellow fever. And so that's part of the process, right? So my thinking, I told him, is that we ought to adopt the mindset that you can't go from here to Costco, to the grocery store, without having shots, without being vaccinated to protect you and to protect other people around you. So I hope that that message got through to him. But I'm saying it now because I know he's going to be working with me on this program and more in the future. I want him to hear this, and I'll be saying it again and again and again till I can smilingly report that he has chosen to get vaccinated and do the entire course and get the booster shot, and that he is operating with confidence that the decision is the right one to make. But I'm just kind of concerned that a lot of people like that in the teens to early 30s, 20s have this ambivalence that from our point of view doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's real for them. What are you thinking about that?
I agree with you. And I was asked a few weeks ago to do a presentation on racism at Edina, and they at the city hall, and they were going to have a gathering in the room with us. Of course, quote unquote, people were going to be with masks, so they said. But
Mhm.
I remember saying to them that, you know what, I think I'd prefer to do it through Zoom,
Mhm.
because it's a whole lot of smart people who are making bad decisions right now about their health.
Mhm.
And a lot of smart people aren't realizing that they're making, I would say, ill advised decisions about their health, taking unnecessary risk. So, what I'm telling people, and the reason I hear your concerns, is that people find ways of doing psychological acrobatics to rationalize whatever it is they want to do. And
Mhm.
I ask people to fight that tendency and that inclination, because sometimes when we are afraid, we find ways of coping by making up excuses for not doing what we need to do for ourselves. I'm a witness of doing that personally. I don't know a human being alive who hasn't done that, made decisions that were contra to your well-being. But when you realize it and you have a whole slew of people advising, pleading, and loving you into understanding the value of your life, then I think you should listen. You need to take heed and not be on the fence. You need to make that decision that I choose to fight. I choose to win. If I get COVID, which I hope I never do, nobody can say I didn't do everything I could to stay alive for my family and my community. They can never say that. And I think that's what we all need to be able to say, because if I take care of me, I'm taking care of you. So I'm
Brother
hoping
Yelly,
that we have that.
Brother
Okay, go
Yelly
ahead.
is here. Brother Yelly, how you doing? Good morning. Good
I'm doing
afternoon.
good, sir. How about you?
You're muted.
I hear him. Yeah, I'm
All right.
well. Good to see you.
All right, same here. And actually, what Dr. B forgot to tell you about the Dana project was she basically, well, it wasn't an ultimatum. She said, look, if I can't do it virtually, then I can't participate. And they choose to do it virtual. I mean, they choose to have only 2 or 3 people, and there was no other person in that room, period. So I think, a lot of people will push you to do things that are contrary to your own well-being, but then
Hmm.
we need to have enough backbones to be able to say, you know what, I'd rather not do that. Even if you're paying me, I don't want to do it. If I cannot protect myself and my own well-being, I choose not to participate. And I think reasonable people out there will accept that, and they will basically agree with you, which was what they did with Dr. B relative to the Dana event. And but in terms of people still finding ways of not taking their shots or getting their booster shots, I've said this before on this show, and to other people, I hope we won't have to witness and go to church burying them. That's how blunt I'm going to be. I can't afford to waffle on this issue anymore.
Yeah.
There was this pastor one of those COVID deniers that died this past week. Huge church. He didn't take his COVID shot, and I think by the time he took it, or he just died. And you have too many reports like that of people denying that this COVID problem will exist, and they are dying. So if you see them dying, and they are the one that are denying that they denying the existence of COVID-19 and its various variants, what else do you really need to know or to see to accept the reality that you need to protect yourself by taking the vaccination? I don't know.
We're going to be joined in a few minutes by Senator Tina Smith, and we're going to ask her impressions, her thoughts about where we are, how we're progressing in the national and local fight against COVID-19 and its variants. But also, she's going to talk about the historic bipartisan infrastructure bill that was signed into law Monday at the White House. President Biden was in town this past week, and the story is that she was able to accompany him back on Air Force One. I'm going to ask her about that. That must have been kind of cool to fly with President Biden and his team on Air Force One. And so momentarily she'll jump in the conversation. But Yelly, I was thinking, I haven't really gone deeply into this, but there are concerns that South Africa, which made a terrific bid to be transparent about the emergence and the appearance of Omicron, somehow the world did and is doing what it normally does, and that's blame South Africa for being the source, or to being it's like shaming, not blaming. I'm not sure the right words, but have you heard this at all? Have you heard this discussion where when Europe and other countries immediately begin to shut down any travel from Southern Africa, it was like a knee-jerk response. Whether it's the right one or not, some World Health officials were saying no. We know where things are. Let's be monitor and manage. Have you heard anything about that at all, Yelly?
Yes, I have, and I've been reading about it even till this morning. You see, this is what is so unfortunate. All these so-called world leaders, and unfortunately, our presidents might be included in this. We have all these selective biases. We don't, at times, I don't even know, I don't want to call it selective biases, but we have ingrained biases in us. And it's basically by ethnicity. When this thing broke in China, I know, people like Trump who are ill-informed tend to blame, they blame China and call it China flu and all that nonsense. But then nobody shut down and nobody treated them like all these so-called world leaders, uninformed leaders are treating South Africa. What about if South Africa choose to do like what Trump always does, or what he always did, by preventing people from knowing? Would that have been a better thing for them to do? But when they choose to do the right thing and be transparent so that we can identify and learn more about this variant, they blame them. There are going to be mutants of this pandemic. And we see that the Delta variant was there. And now it's Omicron. There's going to be some more. So it's unfortunate that people are racist by nature. And I hate to say that. If they're not just racist, they have racial biases, and it's always according to the darker skin. If anything happens in Europe, they're going to play it down. But then if it happens anywhere, they're going to overplay it and proportionally or disproportionately blow it out of proportion. It's unfortunate, but that's the world we live in. But these leaders need to be called out, and they need to take responsibility for perpetrating racial decisions, racial practices, because they are the ones that are actually racializing all these issues. South Africa was very responsible in being transparent. Instead of being commended, they are shaming them. It's unfortunate, and shame on all these leaders.
So, Dr. B, let me ask you, my whole thing is, how do we see the global in the local and look at the global implications of the local? And so this is not disconnected from the experience of people of color, of Black people, of African people in this country, in the West in general. And so this is simply another arena, another level where the practice of what I call, you could call it imperialist thought or white supremacist thought or colonialist thought is still prevalent and still the seat of how power is deployed, engaged in the world. And that happens in the neighborhoods as well. What do you think, Dr. B?
I agree with you. I think that one of the things is that the psychology behind blaming is that victim blaming is that it creates a sense of personal safety. It's false, but that's how victims are blamed. It's just, what did you do to catch it? I haven't done that. Or what did you do to get mugged? Or what did you do to get sexually assaulted? How did that's, you did something wrong. You wore the wrong clothes. You went to the wrong party. So all of those ways are psychological maneuvers to make one feel safe. Just like earlier when I said I'm doing all these things, I'm fighting. And if I do get COVID, they can't say I didn't fight. And so one of the things that we have to respect is people sharing honestly about the presence of the disease. And then secondly, we need to not victim blame, but help people to access the right information and make better choices and use ourselves to influence them. If I say to my husband, you got to take that shot because I don't want to be a widow, at least I won't be one by that. And so it's important to use yourself and your relationships to inform people to make it. I see my brother Oliver are here and our precious Senator Tina Smith. I can hardly speak, but that's what I wanted to say.
Oliver, good to see you. Let me do this. I want to thank you for being here, Senator Tina Smith. And I know you've got a short window, so thank you so much for always taking time to drop in on Conversations with Al McFarlane. And I wanted you to meet my colleagues and friends. We do this every Friday. We call this the Healing Circle, and it's led by Dr. B and her team at the African American Child Wellness Institute. And our focus is on mental health, but also how do we deal with COVID-19 in our community: awareness, adoption, resistance, training protocols. And I wanted you to talk about two things, if you would, Senator Smith. One is sort of from your point of view, how we are faring in our fight against COVID-19. And then I know that you've got some information about the historic bipartisan infrastructure bill that was signed into law last Monday at the White House. Would you share about that as well? So let me, we call it the talking stick. I'm going to hand the talking stick to you, Tina Smith.
Well, thank you so much, Al, and thanks to all of you, Dr. B. It's great to see you. And I was really interested in enjoying the conversation before I got the talking stick. So I'm glad to be with you. I think let me just first talk a little bit about COVID and maybe sort of go off of a little bit about what I heard you just talking about. Mm-hmm. I think that we are all grappling with the reality that this pandemic is not going to just end. One day we're going to wake up and it's over. It's not going to be that way, I don't think. We're seeing that with this new variant. I think we're going to see this virus continue to mutate. And it's going to be coming, public health folks talk about pandemics versus something that is endemic, meaning that it just becomes part of our lives. And before everybody just sort of freaks out about that, what happens is over time, the virus becomes much more manageable. It becomes less virulent, makes you less sick, becomes, I think, potentially, as I've been told by, just the Surgeon General, it becomes something that we are able to manage much better, almost like, it becomes more like the flu or the common cold. Now, this isn't, happy good, but at least it is, I think it helps us to get through some of the trauma that we've experienced over the last now nearly 2 years. If you're worried about this right now, the good news is that it seems, though it's still early days and we have to get much more information, that we're hopeful that the vaccines that we currently have will work with the new variant. And the biggest thing that people can do is to get the vaccine and then get the booster. The other good piece of news, because I'm an optimist, is that the treatments that have recently been approved seem to be extremely effective at keeping the most serious forms of this disease from affecting people. But we still have so much work to do to make sure that these treatments are going to be equitably distributed, that they are available to everybody, and that we break through these historic challenges with systemic racism in our healthcare systems to make sure that people who are, have been historically marginalized and disenfranchised have access to healthcare. And I think that's why places that are in community are the very, very best places for getting out good from community that folks know that they can trust, in a world where, let's be honest, there's a good reason for a lot of people not to trust the sort of establishment, white driven healthcare systems. The other thing I just want to say about this, Al, is that as we watch this pandemic evolve in places around the world, like in Southern Africa, it is a reminder of how we are all connected from a health perspective. And we must not think of ourselves as an island, but we must help our brothers and sisters all over the world get access to this, to the treatments and the viruses, and the vaccines. And where in places like South Africa, for very good reason, people have deep distrust of a medical system that has taken terrible advantage of them over time. So we have to think about this, I think, in a holistic way. In the midst of everything, I'm going to just want me to just talk briefly about the infrastructure bill, Al, before I hand the stick back?
Sure, please.
Let me just say that the bill that the president signed a couple of weeks ago, and that we celebrated when he came to Minnesota on Tuesday of this week, is a historic investment in our communities and in our people. It has to go hand in hand with the Build Back Better budget, which is where the investments in lowering healthcare costs and in making childcare more affordable and more accessible, investments in housing, in kind of the infrastructure of people's lives. Those two things must go hand in hand. But I'm very excited about what it's going to mean for systems, housing, transit, to make our community work better for everyone, and the work around housing and childcare. It was really exciting for me to have Jamez Staples be my guest at the president's.
Your voice is going
Partners is so fantastic. Yeah. He's in North Minneapolis, and it was wonderful to have him there helping to celebrate.
Your audio is coming in and out, Senator Smith. I don't know if your microphone is adjustable or something, but we're losing your audio. Now? I'm still hearing you, but it's fading in and out. But go ahead, keep going.
I wanted to just, I don't know if you heard me talk about how happy I was that Jamez Staples came to be there with the president as we were celebrating the infrastructure bill, and what it can mean for his work to create jobs and opportunity and bring community rooftop solar to communities in North Minneapolis was really great.
Yeli Akinsanya on the call here is also a developer, and I haven't prepped him on this, but I'd be remiss in not asking him to take a second to identify his vision for housing and energy. And it's exactly what Brother Staples is doing, presenting an opportunity for letting our people be involved in the energy field as participants, beneficiaries, producers. And Yeli is trying to do that in connection with home ownership and building housing as well. Yeli, take 1 minute just to introduce yourself so that Senator Smith hears your work. Unmute if you would, Yeli.
Okay. Hello, Senator Smith and Dr. Williams and Dr. B, Mr. McFarlane. My name is Yeli Akinsanya, and if you look at the names on the screen, you will see that Akinsanya appears twice on pictures. So I'm actually a spouse to Dr. B, but then in my past life, I was a developer. We developed some homes in North Minneapolis. Actually, we did that by choice, and the reason behind that was because the rate of home ownership between the African American residents of our metro area and that of the Caucasian is very wide. And when we decided to go into housing development, Dr. B and I, we own the company. When we decided to go into, we were more concerned about home ownership in the African American community, and that was what we did. The city of Minneapolis had a block grant to help first-time home buyers. So we applied each of those home grants ranging from $25,000 to $35,000 to every single home developed by us for every single one that bought those houses. So basically, what I did, okay, Mr. McFarlane, go ahead.
No, I just want to make sure we just bring it in really close because I wanted to keep moving.
Okay, so basically now what we're trying to do is basically close the gap, that has been widening between African American and the Caucasian community. And we have projects in place that will even apply, solar field and solar plants to supply these projects electricity.
That's the message I wanted you to share. That you've got a vision of connecting solar energy with home ownership and housing development involving poor people, people that are out of the market but that need to be in the market. So thank you, Senator Smith. I know you've got to go, but you flew out here with the president on Air Force One. How does that feel? I mean, that's got to be an amazing trip.
That's really what we want to know.
People want to know. I know. Well, I'll just tell you. I'll tell you two things about it. I mean, Air Force One is a 747. It is a big airplane, and so to kind of walk up to the plane and get on, and you do really have a sense of the history of that. And they were so gracious, and they allowed me to tour around and see where the president's desk is and see the conference room. When we took off, we were sitting and having some lunch, and then the president came back and chatted with us, and we talked about what we were going to be seeing and doing in Minnesota, which was really wonderful. I've met the president several times, but he was really great. But here's what absolutely made my day. When you're on Air Force One, you can call people. And so I called my father. Now, my father is 91 years old. I know. My father is 91 years old. He is very engaged politically and he lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And so I called him and I was chatting with him. And who walks back into the room but President Biden? And so I'm on the phone and President Biden says, who are you talking to? And I said, well, I'm talking to my dad, Harlan. And he says, give me the phone. Wow. And so he took the phone and he and my dad spoke for about 5 minutes. And it was such an example of, I know that he was in the back conference room talking about, what's happening with the pandemic and what's happening with the Russian buildup of forces on the border of Ukraine. And yet he came back and he spent 5 minutes speaking with my father. And it's such a sign of his kindness and his humanity and his realness. And I know I will never forget it. And my dad won't either.
Senator Smith, I know that sort of affirms the feeling I have when I say it, that we've got a great leadership team in place in the country and in the state. And I want to say hats off to you and your colleague, Senator Klobuchar, to our House leadership, but also to our governor. I think Governor Tim Walz and Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan are doing phenomenal work of leading with equity, of being intentional and explaining, being transparent, explaining the value of inclusion and diversity in ways never done before in state governments. I think we're at the right place at the right time. I want to close by just some of the bullet points that came with your press release. Transit in Minnesota is going to get $856 million. Highways, $4.5 billion for Minnesota. Bridges, $302 million. Electric vehicle parking, charging, $68 million. Airports, almost $300 million. Water infrastructure, almost $700 million. Broadband, at least $100 million of money coming from the infrastructure package. And broadband is significant because it's going to provide access to 171,000 Minnesota households that currently do not have internet access. And a quarter of that is Black and Latino households. So direct involvement, support, elevation of opportunity for Black and Latino. And so I think that we want to just thank you for your being a part of the leadership and for what you have done and for keeping us informed so that we're motivated to make sure we show up and do our part to support this work.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be with you all. And I always look forward to our conversations, Al. And I'm sorry I'm not in that beautiful house of yours where you broadcast when we're together in person, but we'll do that again.
We will.
We'll do that again sometime soon. And I will be working closely with Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan to make sure that these resources get where they need to get to, and they're distributed, as you say, with equity at the center of our thinking. I look forward to that.
Before I let you go, any thoughts or impressions about the Supreme Court considerations of the Roe v. Wade concerns?
I mean, it was a sobering and frightening hearing to listen to the Supreme Court consider what their next steps are going to be with regard to what I consider to be women's basic freedoms and autonomy. It should be no surprise after 50 years of radical right-wing Federalist Society people trying to figure out how to turn the Supreme Court into a partisan institution and push power back to states. I think it's very concerning to me. I'm very worried about the likelihood that Roe will be overturned by the Supreme Court that includes 3 Supreme Court justices appointed by our former president. And it is, I just can't help if I have a minute more, Al.
Yeah,
we listened to Brett Kavanaugh literally ask the question, why should the Supreme Court be an arbiter on this issue? Why should not we allow the states to decide? And if that is his theory for women's fundamental reproductive health and freedom, what can we expect of him for turning other decisions about our fundamental rights and freedoms back to states, where we can see every day state legislatures and Republican governors are willing to roll those rights back, whether they be voting rights or healthcare rights, civil rights. It was deeply disturbing. That's why I think we need to expand the Supreme Court. We need to get balance back in the Supreme Court so that we can we have to appreciate that this court, because of who has been appointed to it by the president, has become partisan, and we can't just ignore that. We have to deal with it.
Yeah, and the likelihood is that as opportunities to appoint new judges arise, the Republican Party will work as much as they can to block any appointments and changes in the judiciary, because they stacked it nationwide to the detriment of progress already.
Yes.
And so that's another concern. Well, listen, Senator Tina Smith, thank you so much. So good to see you. Keep up the good work on behalf of all our friends here, Dr. B, Brother Yelly, Dr. Oliver Williams, and our community. Thank you so very much, and we'll see you next time.
I'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank
Keep
you.
up the good work. Thank you, sister.
Thank you.
And we're very happy, to hear what you're saying about the Supreme Court and what needed to be done.
Yeah.
Well, this was just a wonderful way to sort of keep our conversation going. A good conversation, a good visit by the senator. Brother Dr. Williams, jump in here. Impressions, thoughts on any part of the conversation so far. I'm going to pass the talking stick to you.
Well, first of all, I'm really pleased that some of the senators and Congress people that we have in the state and who seem to have balance in the way that they, look at the world and talk about and respond to equity. So that's something that I'm impressed by, and have been since, Paul Wellstone,
Mm-hmm.
and who was a friend, and Sheila Wellstone, and the thing that I think about how to respond to issues is the fact that they're putting up the good fight and trying to deal with challenges that exist within our country, and they have to. So I'm glad I live in Minnesota as a consequence, and and I appreciate Senator Smith and her work. I got it when I was had my institute. I got a chance to go to the vice president's house when President Biden was vice president, and he sponsored a lot of work associated with domestic violence. So he was the person that sponsored the bill, the Violence Against Women Act. So I have been really impressed with it. But he does have a kindness and a generosity and that I've seen over the years, and authenticity associated with it that I've noticed with other people from our state that have been elected to that office as well. So I'm encouraged to see what they're doing. I just wish that for suspense sake, it would be nice to be able to get us to, or get our elected officials that are Democrats to move past some things and get it done before, we deal with the next election where the majority may shift a little bit. But I'm pleased that we have the people that we have so far, and they're fighting the good fight for the right reasons, and to deal with equity for people rather than people blatantly, being partisan and trying to go support people who already have so much. So I was pleased with the conversation and where her head is at, and I just want us to be able to push on and get some of the things done, so I won't have to stay up nights and wondering how things are gonna go. So
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
I had a riveting program this past Monday. We encored it again on Tuesday, and it was with 3 members who were present at, actually Monday's signing into law in Minnesota, a bill that created a task force on murdered and missing Black women and girls. And I wanted to ask you all what you thought about that. You brought up the question of domestic violence and how violence against in our community and against women in particular in our community is violence that somehow is normalized or not seen as important. One of the things that the governor's statement when announcing and signing the bill in a ceremony at the Capri Theater in North Minneapolis this week, he said that he acknowledged that missing, murdered Black women's cases, stories don't get the same exposure and don't seem to have the same value as white women, that a white woman's death captures the attention of media and community. A black woman's death does not. Those weren't his exact words, but that was the feeling and the sentiment I got from that. I think that's the right thing to
Right.
say because
Right.
it's true. And so, what are your thoughts, Dr. Williams, about the dynamic of how we've come to accept that when black women, are missing or black women are murdered, it's just another day. I mean, it's almost like we're accepting that when black kids kill each other, oh, it's just another 18-year
Black on
old,
black.
another 20-year-old,
That's right.
and we kind of gotten used to it.
Mhm.
What about that? What do you think, Dr. Williams?
I think that there are ways that we have to talk to our community. I was so pleased at how they dealt with the Ahmaud Arbery case and how it almost got passed over.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that the community kept it alive and that people within the community kept the story alive, and people still attended to it, and that's how it got pushed because it was injustice. There's injustice that happens to us on a regular basis, and there's certain things we can't afford to overlook.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess there are ways that we have to have the conversation among ourselves to be able to give attention to it and then press on. I know that there's that documentary that's been on HBO associated with missing and black women.
Mm-hmm.
And, again, I think it's one of those things that I say this, that we have to learn how to walk and chew gum at the same time, within our community. Sometimes what happens is that, the travesty and the harm that's been done to black men is important. We need to keep our eyes on that. But we also have to keep our eyes on what happens with black women. And sometimes I think people feel as though we have to make a choice, when the choice is to talk about our community and to try to respond to both sets of issues. And so, I know that it's something that is important to women because, they live with it on a regular basis in ways that I don't have to.
That's right.
But I've been in places where I've seen women who've been victims of abuse. And seeing those things and hearing those stories and seeing the atrocities that have happened to them, you don't forget it. And by proxy, also what children are affected by and what they've seen and how they're affected. We talk about responding to victims of abuse, but there's certain things that get missed in terms of the trauma that people experience when they become adults based on the exposure when they were children. And so I think that there are things that we still haven't studied with regard to adults who were affected by domestic violence as children. So, but with women, I know that there has been some attention given to Native American women who have been harmed as well.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to look at the Holocaust of what's been happening to black women too.
Thank you, Brother Oliver. Let me jump in. I feel like being the only black woman on the panel that I need to represent the voice of my sisters. And what I want to say is our bodies as black women, just think back. Our bodies have been stolen. And we were stolen to breed more black folks, as were black men. Our men were taken, our children were taken until our wounds were empty. And I use that word graphically and meaningfully. And so, although we see these problems, I believe that the sexism still lives loudly in our society. And unfortunately, many of our black men and brothers have not fought for sisters. That's why I shut up for a while, because it was such a pleasure to hear Black men validate my existence and that of other Black women. Happened to be a group of 3 Black married men who are faithful to their wives, who are excellent husbands and great community members, happen to be part of this panel. So you exemplify the best of the best, but it's more like you who need to speak up. And so I think that our culture needs to change so that every daughter knows she's got a father, whether he's her biological father or her adopted father in community, and that they can be safe with Black men in this world. And just think about Boko Haram taking those little black girls in Africa, in Nigeria, and taking those babies, and they've never been found. Same thing is happening now with the brown colored sisters who are brown Mexican American sisters, or people who are coming on the Texas border. Those girls are missing. Nobody said a word about all of these missing girls. They're missing. And so one of the things we know is that we are so invisible and we're so beaten down until a lot of times even our men won't speak up for us. Mm-hmm. And we need a louder voice. We need to be more visible. And we become visible when we recognize each other's value in this country and in this society and in this community. And I love to see brothers helping each other. But when sisters get empowered in positions of power, let me tell you, we have to fight like 2 or 3 levels of battles in order to emerge victorious. So I really think that problem is not just a woman's problem. It's not just a Black woman's problem. It's a Black man's problem as well. And so I appreciate the voice you're giving us. And I appreciate the fact that you are noticing that Black women are missing, because we don't supposedly hold that value, because our presence reminds people of their abuses. We represent social contract breaking. We represent the shame that is on us all because of slavery. So I'm going to shut up with that. I'll pass the stick to Brother Yelly, since he didn't get to say anything yet, and I'll let that rest. But that's what I'm feeling.
Well, quickly, I'm just going to take like about 30, 40 seconds, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, I grew up in a family full of women or girls. So right from a very young age, I learned not only how to respect women, but how to not just fight or respect women. Girls in my family will beat you up if you think you're tough. So right from there, you get this perspective that, all sexes are equal. Everybody calls me, people who know me very closely, they said I'm too feminist. I truly wear that. It's an honor for me to people describe me like that, because I fight for both sexes equally. And one of the things that I tell people who know us very closely is that, look, you can mess with me, but don't ever mess with my wife. She's a treasure, and you better treat her as such. You can mess with me, I'll take it, I will fight it out, but don't you ever disrespect my wife. And if you do, we will be in trouble with each other. So if every single Black man or white man treat their own women and their girls like that, I think it will be a better place. What I don't understand is this bias by sex or bias by anything. I really don't understand. And better, there's a better place for us to be. Just treat each other as human beings, and that's my submission.
Yeah, there's a level of competitiveness that I've noticed though too. In different places, around the world, I've noticed that some men sort of feel as though if a woman does well, it's a threat to them. And that the woman's role is to be subordinate. And then, looking at different things, like there's a couple of organizations around the United States that deal with the intersection of domestic violence and faith. And when I went to visit Elizabeth in South Africa, she works with 9 different faiths. And in each one of them, she gets that faith community to do work not only around domestic violence, but also child abuse and neglect. And that the faith leaders are the ones that go into the community to help do the work, to work with their parishioners.
Good.
And whether it's traditional African faith traditions, whether it's Baha'i, whether it's Christianity, whether it's African Christianity, whether it's Judaism, whether it's depending on the set of Islam, and that they embraced it to be able to do the work because they feel like that's their ministry, to be able to help to challenge the myths and the misunderstandings. And I've seen people who have that misunderstanding in terms of how they teach other people how to relate to their partner. But I guess the thing that I keep thinking is, why would one want to subordinate their partner unless they have some sense of insecurity within themselves?
Thank you.
Teach them.
Because if my partner's strong, that helps me to be strong,
That's
and
right.
vice versa.
That's right.
So there's something about being supportive of one another.
So
I
Dr.
love
B,
what you just said. Hold on, let me just say this last thing.
go ahead.
Yesterday, the only other thing I forgot to say is that when you value something, you put your resources in that.
Yes.
If we value our babies, we put money into education and healthcare for them. If we value our women, we do the same for them. Just yesterday, I had a woman who was at my clinic. Her boyfriend put a gun to her head, told her to shoot herself while he was drunk, using up all their money, doing a lot of things, gambling, woman chasing, and leaving her just needing to leave. So we called to get shelter. Do you know what they told me? There's not a single shelter open in Minnesota. There's not one single bed with a woman with 2 or 3 children. We can't help her. Maybe you should call back every 30 minutes to see what you can do. So that lets me know we also need to have additional institutions of our own where we begin to make space for our communities, which aren't the woman alone. It's going to be women with children more than likely. And we need to be aware of that. So I wanted to make sure I said that. Brother Al, you were saying something. I give the stick back to you, my elder.
And I forgot what I was going to say on hearing that breaks my heart. That breaks my heart.
Yes.
And
Well, there's more children in shelters than there are battered women.
Yes.
And that's nationally. And that people are coming up with different strategies on how to respond. Some of it is to be able to put them in shelter programs if they can work it out. But some people are trying to figure out how to develop living spaces where people don't feel as restricted, and that they can sort of live their life more comfortably and more supported. And so, and that's something that I'd like us to maybe have a conversation about, is how do we end up addressing those sets of issues within the community. Some people go to shelter programs and feel comfortable, but some people do it outside of a shelter program. And but we need both to make sure that women's lives are supported and safe. It used to be that women would take women into their own homes if there was victimization going on.
Yeah.
We have to come up with a strategy on how to respond to it, but how to not only support victims of abuse, but how to confront men who batter.
Exactly.
So
and
the
let
thought
me
I was
take
having-
this.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, brother. I was just going to say, let me take the stick and say we need to foster families. And I'll pass the stick to our chief leader, Al, to take us on home.
Well, the question I had, Dr. B, and I was trying to formulate this, but Dr. Williams' comments spoke to it. And maybe we can talk about this in the future. We have in the past already. But is there a different way of knowing? What are there ways of knowing that bring us different outcomes? And it seems that the consensus of what the world is and how it works, how it connects, that we live in and under today is a process, a system, a network that consumes and regurgitates a lot of people, our people in particular. We are chewed up and spit out.
Yes,
And if not that, we are consigned to the margin. We are suppressed and deprived. And the mechanisms for executing that depression, marginalization are so expansive
Right.
and so massive that and so effective that we end up embracing those tools, that language, that way of knowing that justifies the condition that we're in and leaves us with a sense of hopelessness that there's no way out of this. And therefore, we simply accept the fate. I reject that. And I suggest that we have to find ways to rethink, reframe, reorient ourselves for the sake of our own lives and for the sake of our own humanity, for our dignity, for our very existence. And if and as we do that, the world will not let us do that just to save ourselves, because it's predicated on our destruction or our exploitation, our expendability, our the value that we bring to the world is our sense of valuelessness in us and among us that allows them to extract value from us: labor, raw materials, brain power, uh, never for our benefit, always for theirs, squeezed, right? And so the question is, if we and as we reject that history, and it's a relatively new history, 500 or so years old, how do we return to, rediscover, reconnect with ways of knowing that reveal um, our understanding of what a human being is? And the point I was going to make is that if and as we do that, the world that exists will react to it and resist it, and that our work will not be complete until we change that world as well. Changing ourselves, protecting ourselves, becoming ourselves, therefore necessarily involves changing them and changing the world. The question is, will we accept that responsibility and hold ourselves accountable to history, to time, to humanity for that? Dr. Williams, is that too much? Am I pipe dreaming?
No. Actually, one of the things that I think about, some of the people that have passed away within the last couple of years, I think of Ferris Glover, who passed away recently. And I think of Jim Bransford, who passed away recently. And when I think of those two people, hurting people hurt people is one phrase, but healed people help to heal people.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a number of examples, even you all in the discussion here are examples of people who help to heal people. And I think that's if we could organize that and identify people who are examples of folks who help to heal the community, and then get more people on board with that, and people who know how to listen. I've got this. I got to get this to you, Al, and Dr. B, and Yeli. I've got this video about how churches across the United States who went to 5 different communities, and they're addressing domestic violence. They have it as ministry. And the one thing that they teach them how to do first, because they trained them in their ministry on how to respond to domestic violence. They teach them how to listen and how to hear it first. Because among the things that happen is that when you go to places where people don't hear it and can't hear it, that pushes people off.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to find ways to be able to hear it and respond to what people are going through, and know where to direct them. And there are really great examples of people who have been harmed, who are healed, who help to heal. And there's some examples of it across the United States. And we should do that. We should be a bastion of that within the Twin Cities.
Let's do it. Let's make it
Let's
happen.
do
It's
it.
part of our mission here. Well, this has been a great program. Thank you all. Dr. B, thank you. Brother Yelly, thank you. Dr. Williams, thank you. I'm Al McFarlane. Conversations with Al McFarlane Friday, the Healing Circle. Will be replaying this. I want to acknowledge that this program is being streamed live to the Inside News Facebook page and the Al McFarlane Facebook page. But if you are a Facebook user or getting us on Facebook, we love you to share this to your networks, to like it. We're also streaming it on YouTube. But I want to thank our association with the Black Press of America. We're also streaming live to Black Press USA Facebook page. Our goal is to communicate, connect, to share our vision, our version of truth, and to elevate and celebrate who we are, who we have been, and who we are becoming. So with that, I thank you all. See you this time next week. Take care. Bye-bye.